The morning air at Blackwood Military Academy was sharp and cold, the kind that made breath rise like ghosts over a battlefield. A thin layer of frost still clung to the perfectly manicured parade ground, shrouding the historic buildings in a veil of icy white. The American flag hung heavy and still against its pole, waiting for the day's first breath of wind. The academy stood as it had for generations, a bastion of tradition, discipline, and the unyielding promise of military excellence. From the window of his mahogany-paneled office, Colonel James Thorne observed the empty grounds, a steaming porcelain coffee cup warming his weathered hands. At 60, his ramrod-straight posture betrayed nothing of the bullet fragment still nestled near his hip, a permanent reminder of Fallujah. The walls around him testified to a life of service. Photos with defense secretaries, ranger tabs, campaign medals arranged with meticulous precision. His reflection in the window glass revealed the face of a man who had seen combat in 3 conflicts and buried too many friends. "They're not ready," he murmured to himself, thinking of the current class of cadets. Brilliant young minds, perfect in parade drills but untested by the unforgiving crucible of real conflict. His intercom buzzed softly. "Colonel, Lieutenant Commander Vance has arrived." Thorne nodded to himself. Send her in. Perhaps she was the catalyst they needed. Across the academy, cadets assembled on the parade ground for morning formation. Crisp rows of pressed uniforms, polished boots, and expectant faces. They stood at rigid attention, rumors already swirling about their new physical training instructor. "Heard she's some hotshot from a special operations unit," whispered one cadet to another. "Better not be another drill sergeant psycho," replied his friend. "My shins can't take another beating from Sergeant Dixon." Cadet Kyle Patterson stood at the front of the formation, his posture impeccable, his uniform without a single crease out of place. As squad leader, he took pride in setting the example. At 24, with the strong jaw and confident bearing of a 4th-generation military man, Kyle already carried himself with the authority of a born officer. His father, Lieutenant General Robert Patterson, commanded the 1st Armored Division. His grandfather had led men at Khe Sanh. Military excellence wasn't just expected, it was his birthright. "Attention!" barked the senior cadet, and the formation snapped even straighter as Colonel Thorne approached, a figure walking beside him. What the cadets saw was not what they expected. Lieutenant Commander Cassandra Vance walked with a quiet, coiled confidence, her stride measured and deliberate. There was no swagger, no obvious intimidation in her posture. She wore simple black sweats instead of a dress uniform, her strikingly blonde hair pulled back in a severe regulation bun. The only notable feature was a thin, pale scar that traced her jawline, disappearing beneath her ear. At 35, her face held the weathered look of someone who had spent years in harsh environments. Yet her eyes were a clear, piercing blue, constantly scanning, assessing, missing nothing. Before I tell you what happened next, subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments what time it is where you're watching from. It helps more than you know. "Cadets," Colonel Thorne's voice carried across the formation without effort. "This is your new physical training instructor, Lieutenant Commander Cassandra Vance." A ripple of whispers moved through the ranks. Lieutenant Commander, a Navy rank equivalent to an Army major, not the usual rank for a PT instructor. "Commander Vance brings extensive field experience to Blackwood," Thorne continued. "You will afford her every courtesy and respect due her rank and position. Commander, they're all yours." Cassandra stepped forward as Thorne departed. She surveyed the formation with a gaze that seemed to catalog each face, each minor imperfection in posture, each flicker of reaction. When she spoke, her voice was calm yet carried an undercurrent of steel. "Good morning, cadets. We have much to accomplish together in the coming weeks. Today, we'll establish baselines, 14 laps around the perimeter. Full gear." Kyle shifted his weight almost imperceptibly. "Ma'am, our standard protocol begins with dynamic stretching and mobility drills before any endurance run. In my experience, cadet," she cut him off without raising her voice, "the enemy doesn't wait for you to warm up." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "But if you prefer, you can perform extra mobility drills after everyone else finishes." Several cadets failed to suppress smiles. Kyle's jaw tightened. 14 laps. Begin now." The formation broke. cadets settling into their run around the mile-long perimeter. Cassandra joined them, maintaining a steady metronomic pace at the rear of the group, observing form and endurance without comment. By the sixth lap, the formation had stretched thin, the strongest runners pulling ahead, the struggling ones falling behind. Kyle maintained his position at the front, his stride confident. Beside him ran Cadet Mark Alvarez, a sharp, tactical student. Several paces behind, Cadet Sophia Reed kept a steady rhythm, her expression one of focused determination. "Who does she think she is?" Kyle muttered between controlled breaths. 14 laps right off the bat, no proper warm-up. And did you see her? No command presence. Lieutenant Commander, though. Mark matched his pace. That's not a rank they hand out for running a gym. Probably a staff officer who needs a field credit for promotion, Kyle replied. Look at her. My father says the standards are being lowered for political appointments. On the 10th lap, Kyle noticed something unsettling. While many cadets were showing signs of fatigue, Cassandra maintained the exact same steady rhythm she'd started with. Her breathing remained controlled, her form economical, wasting no energy. She wasn't running to prove a point. She was running like someone who had learned that endurance was synonymous with survival. By the final lap, even Kyle felt the burn in his lungs and legs. Cassandra, however, looked like she could go another 14 without difficulty. As they completed the run, she moved to the front, her piercing blue eyes missing nothing as each cadet finished, gasping for air. Form a line, she ordered once the last cadet stumbled across the line. Recovery positions. As the cadets caught their breath, she walked the line, making small adjustments to posture, offering brief technical comments on form. When she reached Kyle, she paused. You're overstriding on the declines, she said quietly. Shortening your step by 15% reduces impact and conserves energy. Learned that carrying a 200-pound comms specialist out of the Kunar Valley. Before Kyle could formulate a response, she had moved on. The casual reference to a combat zone hung in the air between them like a silent challenge. Later, the mess hall. Kyle sat with Mark and Sophia the morning's training session, leaving a sour taste that the bland eggs couldn't mask. She's different, Sophia said, breaking the silence. Not like our other instructors. Kyle stabbed at his eggs. Different doesn't mean better. Who cares if she can run? PT isn't combat leadership. Mark leaned forward. I looked her up in the directory during first period. She's not listed under regular faculty. Just special instructor with a security clearance I can't access. My father could find out with one call, Kyle said, but made no move to reach for his phone. Sophia studied him. You're bothered because she corrected you in front of everyone. I'm bothered because she's treating PT like it's some kind of spec ops indoctrination, Kyle replied, his voice tight. There's no way she has the kind of experience she's hinting at. It's all posturing. Miles away from the academy, in a sparse, utilitarian apartment, Cassandra Vance sat at a small desk, a single lamp casting a pool of light over a worn leather journal. Her fingers traced the edge of a small, polished wooden box before opening it. Inside, nestled against black velvet, was a silver star. She didn't touch the metal. Instead, she opened the journal to a page marked by a faded photograph. 5 men and 1 woman, herself younger, her hair sun-bleached almost white, standing before a dusty Humvee. Their expressions grim but resolved. The caption, written in fading ink, read, Kunar Province, Operation Iron Fist. Cassandra closed her eyes, the sterile quiet of her apartment dissolving into the memory of roaring engines and the taste of dust. The mission had gone wrong, horribly wrong. An IED, then an ambush. Her team pinned down. The radio chatter frantic. Her team leader, Master Chief David Croft, shouting orders until a sniper's round found its mark. Then her own voice, surprisingly calm, taking control, coordinating fire, calling in air support, all while applying pressure to a wound that would leave the scar on her jaw. She'd received the Silver Star for what happened next. For getting what was left of her team out alive. The medal meant nothing compared to the names in her journal. Tomorrow would test another group of would-be leaders. She would not fail them, even if they didn't yet understand the deadly serious game they were about to play. But the next morning, during a brutal obstacle course drill in a driving rainstorm, Kyle Patterson's simmering resentment would boil over into an act of outright defiance that would force Cassandra Vance to reveal a fraction of the lethal skill she kept hidden and change the course of his life forever. The next morning broke gray and dismal, a cold, relentless rain sheeting down across the academy grounds, turning the pristine parade field into a churned expanse of mud. It was, Cassandra Vance thought as she stood waiting at the edge of the training field, perfect. Her expression remained neutral as the cadets assembled, raindrops streaming down their faces, their uniforms already soaked through and clinging uncomfortably. She saw the discomfort in their postures, the silent resentment in their eyes. It was exactly what she needed to see. Today, she announced, her voice cutting cleanly through the drumming rain, we focus on tactical movement under adverse conditions. In the field, the mission doesn't pause for weather. The enemy doesn't care if you're comfortable. She gestured to the obstacle course which she had modified overnight. Low ropes were strung over water-filled trenches, balance beams were slick and treacherous, and the climbing walls offered minimal, muddy handholds. This isn't about speed or showing off. It's about controlled, precise progress. Out there, she pointed vaguely towards the horizon, haste gets people killed. Discipline saves lives. Kyle Patterson surveyed the course with thinly veiled disdain. Ma'am, he began, his voice formal. Academy Regulation 712 specifies that high-risk obstacle training should be postponed during severe weather conditions for safety reasons. Cassandra turned to him slowly, rain plastering strands of her blonde hair to her temples. Cadet Patterson, are you concerned about safety or about preserving the press in your uniform? A few stifled laughs escaped the formation. Kyle's face flushed a dull red. I'm concerned about established protocols, ma'am. Protocols? Cassandra nodded thoughtfully. Tell me, Cadet, when your convoy is hit and you're evacuating wounded through a mudslide under fire, which protocol manual covers that scenario? What page would you reference? Kyle had no answer. The silence from the other cadets was absolute. The ground doesn't care about your family name, Cassandra continued, her voice carrying to the entire formation despite the downpour. It doesn't respect your rank or your protocols. It tests everyone equally without mercy or favor. She turned to address them all. First evolution. Low. Crawl under wire 25 yards. Maintain weapon control. Training rifles are at the starting line. First squad, move out. The cadets broke formation, collecting the weighted mock M4s before taking their positions. The first group began immediately, struggling through the thick mud that seemed to suck at their elbows and knees with each movement. Cassandra moved alongside the course, observing without interference, her sharp eyes missing nothing. Most cadets adopted an inefficient, exhausting crawl. When Kyle's turn came, he attacked the course with aggressive determination, moving faster than the others but with a technique that betrayed his lack of real-world application. Halfway through, his rifle sling caught sharply on a wire stake, jerking him to an abrupt, frustrating halt. He yanked at the weapon, causing the entire wire to bounce and snag the cadet behind him. Cassandra appeared beside him, kneeling in the mud without a second's hesitation. Control, not chaos, she stated, her voice calm. Slow is smooth. Smooth is fast. With a practiced, effortless motion, she demonstrated how to twist and free the sling. When you rush, you create problems for your entire team. In a real scenario, that wire bouncing could give away your position. Your impatience gets people killed. Kyle freed himself and continued, but his expression was thunderous. When he completed the course, caked in mud from head to toe, he rejoined the formation with barely contained fury. CTA. Before I reveal what happens next, subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Your support means everything. As the morning wore on, Cassandra increased the complexity, incorporating team-based drills. The rain intensified, turning the ground into a quagmire that sapped their strength and morale. During a brief water break, Cadet Sophia Reed approached her. Commander Vance, Sophia began cautiously, may I ask about the tactical reasoning behind these specific drills? They're different from our standard regimen. Cassandra regarded her thoughtfully. What's your career path, Cadet Reed? Military intelligence, ma'am. Hoping for field collection. Then you need to understand that intelligence is only as good as the operator who collects it. Cassandra replied. These drills teach you to think clearly when your body is screaming to shut down. They teach situational awareness when every instinct tells you to focus only on your own misery. Before Sophia could respond, Kyle's voice cut through the rain, sharp with challenge. With respect, ma'am. These drills seem more suited to special operations recruitment than officer preparation. Most of us are headed for conventional units. Several cadets had gathered around watching the exchange with keen interest. Cassandra studied Kyle for a long moment, the rain streaming down her face. You think this is special operations training? A ghost of a smile, cold and humorless, touched her lips. This is basic fundamentals. Kyle's posture stiffened. Then perhaps our time would be better spent on relevant training, ma'am. The challenge hung in the air, a direct affront to her authority and methods. The other cadets held their breath. Then, without a word, Cassandra removed her instructor's rain jacket and handed it to Sophia. Beneath it, her t-shirt clung to a frame of lean, functional muscle, the kind forged through years of brutal, real-world demand, not weight-room vanity. Observe, she said simply. What followed left the cadets in stunned silence. Cassandra moved through the obstacle course with a fluid, predatory grace that made their own efforts look clumsy and amateurish. She navigated the mud with minimal disturbance, her body maintaining perfect contact with the earth under the wire. At the wall, she ascended not with a struggle, but with an efficient flowing motion that seemed to defy the slick surface and her own body weight. She completed the entire complex course in a third of the time of their best cadet, her breathing even, her simulated weapon always in a ready position. When she finished, she walked back to the group, mud coating her legs and torso, but her composure entirely unnervingly intact. Relevant enough for you, Cadet Patterson? She asked, her voice quiet but carrying like a whip crack. Mark Alvarez whispered to Sophia, "That wasn't officer training. I've only seen movement like that in combat footage from Tier 1 guys." Kyle said nothing, but the confident smirk had been wiped from his face, replaced by a stunned, calculating silence. "Final evolution," Cassandra called, pulling their attention back. "Team movement under wire with simulated casualty extraction. 4-person teams. Full stretcher with weighted dummy. Coordinated movement is essential. First team, Patterson, Alvarez, Reed, and Davis." Kyle found himself designated as team leader. They were given a standard field stretcher and a heavy, unwieldy training dummy. "Sir, with all due respect," he began, using the incorrect Army honorific deliberately. "The exercise begins now, cadet," she interrupted, her voice taking on a harder edge. "Your wounded comrade is bleeding out while you're debating protocol." Fuming, Kyle organized his team, placing the dummy on the stretcher and assigning positions. The weight was substantial, especially in the treacherous mud. As they approached the wire section, the real challenge became apparent. The stretcher would barely fit underneath, requiring perfect synchronized coordination from all 4. "Lower!" Kyle ordered as they struggled under the wire. "Davis, keep your end down!" Davis, already straining under the weight, tried to adjust but slipped, causing the stretcher to tilt violently and nearly spill the dummy. "Steady!" Kyle barked. "Alvarez, take some weight from Davis." They maneuvered slowly, painfully, each yard a battle against exhaustion and the elements. Kyle, in the lead position, grew increasingly frustrated with his team's performance. Cassandra walked alongside, observing without comment, her presence a constant, aggravating reminder of his failure to lead effectively. "Your team is struggling because your commands are reactive, not proactive," she stated calmly. "You're not reading the terrain ahead, Cadet Patterson." "We're doing fine, ma'am," Kyle replied through gritted teeth. "Your wounded soldier would have bled out 5 minutes ago," she countered. "And Davis is about to collapse from exhaustion because you've positioned him incorrectly for his height." Kyle felt his control slipping. The rain, the mud, the weight, and this woman's relentless criticism converged into a burning knot of pure anger. "Perhaps you'd like to demonstrate the proper technique, ma'am," he said, his voice thick with sarcasm. "I would," she replied evenly. "But I learned long ago that some lessons must be experienced, not demonstrated." As they struggled through the final section, Davis's footing gave way completely. The stretcher lurched, and, in trying to compensate, Kyle also lost his balance. As he stumbled, Cassandra moved with startling speed to stabilize the stretcher from his side. Something in Kyle snapped. In a moment of pure, unthinking frustration, he straightened abruptly, his shoulder connecting hard with Cassandra's chest, shoving her backward into the mud. Time froze. The other cadets stood motionless, shock evident on their faces. Even Kyle looked stunned at his own action, the color draining from his face as he realized he had just deliberately assaulted a superior officer. Cassandra lay in the mud for a single heartbeat, then rose with deliberate, terrifying calm. Mud streaked her face and clothes, but her eyes, those were different now. The professional reserve had vanished, replaced by something cold, flat, and evaluating. It wasn't the anger of a disrespected instructor. It was the calculating gaze of a predator assessing a threat. Every cadet felt the shift in the air. This was the look of someone who had faced death and dealt it in return. "Exercise terminated," she said, her voice quiet but silencing the entire field. "All cadets except Patterson return to barracks. Now." As the others hurried away, casting nervous glances back, Cassandra approached Kyle. She stopped an arm's length away, studying him with that unnerving gaze. "Do you know what you just did, cadet?" she asked. Kyle stood at rigid attention, eyes forward. "I assaulted a superior officer, ma'am. I accept whatever punishment." "No!" She cut him off, her voice dropping so only he could hear. "In tactical terms, you just compromised your entire team. Your action would have left the wounded exposed, your team disorganized, and likely resulted in multiple casualties." She stepped closer. "On my last operation in the Kunar Valley, a moment of frustration like that cost me my team leader." Kyle's eyes widened slightly. "You will report to the obstacle course at 0400 tomorrow," she continued, her voice returning to its normal icy volume. "You will undergo a special training evolution designed specifically for you. 24 hours of continuous operation. Come prepared." She turned to leave, then stopped. "And Cadet Patterson, bring only what you can carry for 20 miles. You're going to need every ounce of that famous family endurance you're so proud of." As Cassandra walked away, her back straight despite the mud coating her uniform, Kyle stood motionless in the pouring rain. For the first time in his academy career, genuine fear flickered across his face. At 0400 the next morning, under a cloak of oppressive darkness, Kyle Patterson would begin his assessment. But it was nothing like he expected. It was a game of tactical cat and mouse where the stakes were his future, and the woman hunting him was a ghost from Special Operations' most secretive world. Dawn broke over Blackwood Military Academy in a thin, colorless wash of light, the sky still bruised from the night storm. The obstacle course lay silent beneath a sheen of drifting mist, its pits and rope crawls slick with mud that clung like tar. Lieutenant Commander Cassandra Vance arrived at 445, her steps soundless on the wet ground, a rucksack slung over her shoulder with the effortless familiarity of someone who had carried far heavier burdens across far uglier landscapes. She paused at the center of the course, scanning every angle, every tree line, every blind corner, as if expecting ghosts from past battlefields to materialize from the fog. At 0458, Cadet Kyle Patterson emerged from the gloom. He was immaculate despite the punishing hour, his uniform neat, his posture rigid. But his eyes told the truth. He hadn't slept. "Reporting as ordered, ma'am," he said, voice steady but edged with uncertainty. Cassandra studied him in silence. "Do you know why you're here, Cadet Patterson?" "To receive disciplinary training for my actions yesterday, ma'am." "No." Her reply was immediate, precise. "Discipline would have prevented those actions. This isn't punishment, this is education." She motioned to his rucksack. "Empty it." Kyle complied, laying out his gear on the damp earth. Cassandra mirrored the action, opening her own pack. From it, she removed an encrypted radio, a laminated map marked with cryptic symbols, and a luminous compass scarred from years of use. She placed them into his pack one by one, each movement deliberate, almost ritualistic. "In the field, you rarely have the full picture," she said. "You execute your portion of the mission with partial information, trusting your commander has the rest. Today, I am your commander." She handed him a sealed envelope. "Your first task, navigate to these coordinates. Open this only when you arrive. You have 40 minutes. Kyle scanned the numbers, his brows tightening. That's nearly 6 miles, ma'am. Then you'd better start moving. He didn't waste another second. He shouldered the pack and vanished into the tree line, running with a determination born of pride and fear. Cassandra watched him disappear, then keyed her radio with calm precision. "Thorne, this is Vance. Evolution 1 is underway. Observation teams are set," Colonel Thorne replied. "Try not to break the General's sun." "No promises, sir." The forest swallowed Kyle whole. The storm had left the terrain a treacherous labyrinth. Mud, pits disguised as solid earth, slick roots lying in wait beneath fallen leaves, and thick undergrowth that clawed at his legs. His breath misted in the cold air as he navigated, checking his compass, adjusting his route, recalculating constantly. This wasn't an academy trail, this was wilderness, raw, unpredictable, and indifferent to pedigree. At the edge of a clearing, Kyle froze. Cassandra's warning about roving patrols echoed in his mind. Instead of crossing openly, he circled under cover. The decision saved him. 2 academy staff in ghillie suits crouched exactly where he would have stepped out. A trap avoided. He pressed on, reaching the coordinates with minutes to spare. Beneath a rotting log, he found another sealed envelope. Inside, riddles. Cryptic military-themed clues pointing toward new locations scattered miles apart. This would take hours. He memorized them and pocketed the paper. As he rose, a voice materialized behind him like a breath of cold steel. "You've been spotted, cadet." Mission compromised. Kyle spun. Cassandra stood less than 10 feet away. He hadn't heard her approach. Not a twig snap, not a footfall. "First lesson," she said softly. "Always secure your perimeter." He stiffened. "With respect, ma'am, this is a controlled training evolution. Every evolution prepares you for the uncontrolled." She gestured to the riddles. "Continue. Ma'am, these could take all day. Then you'll learn how long a day can be." She vanished into the trees like smoke. For the next several hours, Kyle navigated rugged, punishing terrain, solving riddles, locating markers, and pushing through exhaustion until even his anger burned away. By noon, soaked, blistered, and drained to his bones, he stumbled into a rocky stream bed where Cassandra sat waiting, eating calmly from a ration pack. Another rested beside her. "Sit, cadet," she said, her tone unreadable. 12 minutes for nutrition and hydration." Kyle lowered himself onto the slick stones beside Cassandra, the cold spreading through his exhausted muscles like creeping frost. His hands trembled as he accepted the ration pack she slid toward him. Even the simple act of unsealing it felt monumental. Cassandra watched him with the clinical detachment of a battlefield medic assessing a wounded soldier's cognitive state. "You're past the superficial stage of fatigue," she said, checking her watch. "Now comes the part where your mind starts lying to you. Eat slowly." Kyle forced down mouthfuls of the dense, metallic-tasting food. Rainwater dripped from the pine branches above, creating soft patters around them. He took a breath, steadying himself. "Ma'am," he said, "permission to ask a question." "Granted. What's the actual point of this, beyond testing my endurance?" Cassandra wiped her hands on a cloth, then leaned forward slightly. "In Afghanistan, I once spent 60 hours on a mission that was supposed to last 8. No resupply. Minimal comms. Continuous movement. By the time extraction came, my body was shutting down. My mind was barely functional, but decisions still had to be made." Her eyes shifted to the tree line, as if she could still see the mountains of Kunar through the dripping forest. "Endurance isn't a measure of strength. It's a measure of what remains after strength is gone." Kyle swallowed. "You were there that long." "Alone?" She shook her head. "Never alone. I had a team. People who depended on me keeping my head when everything hurt." A shadow passed across her face, a flicker of something raw. "My team leader, Master Chief Croft, used to say fatigue exposes truth. It shows who leads and who folds." Kyle absorbed the words, letting silence settle between them. The rain eased slightly, replaced by the distant rumble of wind shifting through the canopy. "Time's up," Cassandra said at last. She stood with effortless precision as if the hours of movement hadn't touched her. "Next phase." Kyle pushed himself upright, every joint protesting. "Ma'am, what now?" "A scenario. One requiring intelligence, restraint, and tactical judgment." She handed him a new envelope, sealed in clear laminate. Inside is the briefing for a simulated hostage situation. You will conduct reconnaissance alone, identify patterns, and propose an extraction plan. Alone, ma'am? Leadership is often lonely, she replied, and consequences are rarely shared. She paused. You have 30 minutes to reach the observation point. Kyle nodded, shouldered his pack again, and set off. Cassandra watched him disappear between the dripping pines, her expression unreadable. The observation point was a ridge overlooking a clearing where 2 academy structures had been transformed to resemble a hostile compound. Kyle belly-crawled the final meters, lifting his binoculars. 4 guards, roving patterns, 1 stationary at the main entrance, a makeshift command post in the northeast building. And there, 2nd floor, he spotted the hostage, a dummy strapped to a chair. He documented every detail, marking notes in his field book, tracking rotations by the minute. The cold bit into his elbows, but he didn't move. Cassandra's voice echoed in his memory. Fatigue exposes truth. 57 minutes passed before she appeared beside him, materializing from the tree line without disturbing a single leaf. What do you see? Kyle continued scanning. 4 guards on rotating patrol, 2 static. The hostage is under continuous visual coverage. Terrain favors infiltration from the west. Good, she said quietly. And what haven't you considered? Kyle frowned, replaying the scenario in his mind. Nightfall variables. Hostage condition. She cut him off. Why are they holding a hostage, Patterson? What leverage do they gain? What behavior does that motive create? Her voice lowered. Kunar Province. We missed that question. It cost us blood. Kyle's breath hitched. He adjusted his binoculars and froze. A figure inside the command post. Not a dummy. Not an instructor. Cadet Mark Alvarez. He was gesturing subtly toward the back of the building, then tapping his ear. Not random movements. Signals. A variable. A wild card. Kyle's pulse hammered. Ma'am, Alvarez is inside. Cassandra did not react. Then reassess your plan. He stared through the lenses, mind racing. His original infiltration approach was suddenly insufficient. The presence of someone he knew changed everything. Stealth alone wouldn't guarantee success. Information mattered now. Human factors mattered. Alvarez's presence demanded a new plan, one that balanced speed with risk, instinct with intelligence. Cassandra stepped back. You have 30 minutes to prepare your extraction strategy, Cadet. Then she vanished into the trees, leaving Kyle alone with the weight of his decisions, and the knowledge that one wrong move could doom the entire mission. Kyle Patterson remained prone on the ridge, binoculars pressed to his eyes, the cold dampness of the earth seeping through his uniform. But the chill no longer registered, not after what he had seen. Cadet Mark Alvarez, standing inside the command post, was not part of the scenario briefing. Alvarez wasn't tied up nor restrained. He was moving deliberately, tapping his ear, pointing toward the southwest corner. A signal, a message. But to whom? Kyle's heart hammered in a way the long-distance navigation never provoked. This wasn't like the riddles or the roving patrols. This was human, personal, and that changed everything. He reviewed his notes again, recalculating every assumption. 4 patrolling guards, 2 static, a hostage dummy, a communications antenna, and now an inserted human variable. Alvarez's presence destroyed Kyle's original infiltration plan. Stealth wasn't enough. He needed to understand what Alvarez represented, asset or obstacle. A twig snapped lightly behind him. Report, Cassandra Vance murmured, lowering herself beside him with the impossible quiet of a predator. Ma'am, Kyle whispered, I have visual confirmation on Cadet Alvarez inside the command post. Describe his behavior. Subtle signaling. He pointed toward the southwest corner, then tapped his ear. He might be indicating blind spots or comms issues, but his presence changes everything. Correct, Vance replied. So what does the new variable tell you? Kyle swallowed. That the scenario isn't about extraction alone, it's a test of judgment. Human judgment. Good. Her voice was flat but not dismissive. Continue. He analyzed again. Alvarez moved with purpose but tension, not panicked, cooperative. His posture suggested compliance but not captivity. Someone inside playing a role, but a role with layers, a hidden test within the test. Kyle exhaled slowly. He isn't a hostage. He's an informant. Vance said nothing. And if he's an informant, then my mission isn't just extraction. It's intelligence gathering. His value is information. If I extract him without understanding his role, I compromise the objective. Still no response. Kyle understood. The silence was deliberate. The real test was whether he could finish the thought alone. So I need to assess him first, Kyle continued, not rescue him. Validate his intel. Confirm motive. Determine risk. That's what I failed yesterday during the stretcher drill. I acted without assessing. Cassandra's gaze shifted toward him. Sharp as a blade. Proceed. Kyle studied Alvarez again. His friend kept glancing toward the main entrance, subtly avoiding eye contact with patrolling guards. He wasn't pretending to be a hostage. He was pretending to be overlooked. Kyle's pulse steadied. I'll need a multi-phase approach. Phase 1. Create a distraction to isolate internal movement. Phase 2. Infiltrate via the west culvert using the terrain to mask approach. Phase 3. Speak to Alvarez, silently or through signals to confirm his intel. Phase 4. Decide between extraction, delayed extraction, or ignoring him entirely depending on the truth. Cassandra's eyes narrowed, not in disapproval but in scrutiny. And the hostage in the southwest building? Kyle resumed scanning. A decoy. It forces focus in the wrong direction. The real objective is inside the command post. Alvarez is the key. The scenario wants me to assume the hostage is primary, but the real mission is intelligence. Cassandra whispered. Kunar Province. We assumed our target was the objective. We ignored the signs that the enemy wanted us drawn inside. Her voice carried the weight of a grave. Kyle's throat tightened. So the decision must not be driven by emotion. It must be driven by strategy. A faint nod. Now create your plan. You have 20 minutes. Kyle retreated deeper into the trees, laying out his map, tools, and notes. He sketched routes, fallback positions, timing windows, and contingencies. He calculated silence thresholds and guard blind spots. He designed a covert gesture code for Alvarez. Every decision flowed from a sharpened awareness. This wasn't about heroics. This was about discernment. 20 minutes later, Kyle presented the plan at the ridge. Vance listened without interruption. When he finished, her expression gave nothing away. Then she stepped back, keyed her radio, and said words that hit him like a physical blow. Control, this is Vance. Exercise goes live. Cadet Patterson has tactical command. Initiate the scenario. Kyle froze. She wasn't evaluating his plan, she was activating it. You will now execute, she said. Every choice you make from this moment forward will determine your outcome. Kyle's pulse thundered. The theoretical had just become real. He slid into the tree line, preparing to lead the assault, unaware that one decision waiting ahead would break either the scenario or him. Kyle descended the ridge with measured, deliberate movements, every muscle poised between adrenaline and exhaustion. The forest around him was hushed, heavy with moisture and anticipation. This was no longer rehearsal. Commander Vance had placed tactical command in his hands, and every choice he made would be judged as if lives were on the line. He crouched behind a fallen tree, pulled the noisemaker from his kit, and adjusted its timer. 30 seconds. Enough to draw attention, but not enough to reveal intent. He planted it in a wedge of brush near the compound's main gate, burying it beneath wet leaves. His pulse hammered, but his breathing stayed controlled, training, overriding fear. When the device was set, he sprinted low through the undergrowth toward the culvert, slipping into the narrow, waterlogged pipe just as the noisemaker detonated with a sharp, echoing crack. Shouts burst across the compound. Flashlights scattered. The two stationary guards at the gate moved instantly toward the noise, and one roving patrol rushed to support them, exactly as he'd hoped. The culvert emptied him into the western perimeter. Kyle slid out, landing silently on soaked earth. He pressed his back against the outer wall of the command post, keeping below the windows. The remaining patrol was further east. He had a window. Now came the true test. He edged toward a side entry door. Unlocked. He inhaled, steadied himself, and entered. Inside, dim training lights cast long shadows across the hallway. The low hum of a generator masked the sound of his steps. Kyle advanced toward the command post room, rifle at the ready, finger poised but disciplined. He didn't call out to Alvarez. He didn't charge. This time he approached with the restraint Cassandra had drilled into him. As he eased inside, he found Mark Alvarez exactly where he'd been earlier, standing alone, tense, eyes flicking toward the doorway. Kyle raised a fist. Silent code, hold position. Alvarez nodded, relief washing across his face. Kyle approached cautiously, signaling with 2 fingers. Are you compromised? Alvarez shook his head. 3 fingers. Intel. Alvarez pointed subtly toward a nearby room, then tapped his ear, again indicating surveillance or audio monitoring. Kyle scanned. No cameras, no visible devices, but one door was closed. The command post's inner room. Kyle signaled, enemy presence? Alvarez tilted his hand. Unknown, Kyle processed. Intelligence gathering required risk, but calculated risk. He motioned for Alvarez to stay behind him. He stepped toward the closed door, rifle angled down, ready but not aggressive. He turned the handle smoothly. The door flew open. A guard burst out, raising a training rifle. Kyle reacted instinctively, shoving Alvarez aside and firing 2 simulation rounds into the guard's vest. Lights flared red on the man's chest. Neutralized. Kyle breathed hard. Too hard. Alvarez stared at him. Kyle, listen. No time, Kyle snapped. We're moving to extraction. Kyle, wait, Alvarez hissed. You're not understanding my role. But adrenaline drowned out nuance. Kyle grabbed Alvarez's sleeve and pulled him toward the exit, guided by pure instinct. His mind screamed with the echo of yesterday's failure. Don't freeze. Don't hesitate. Act. They reached the culvert entrance. Kyle pushed Alvarez ahead of him, scrambling through mud and cold, ragged breaths rattling the tight space. Once clear of the pipe, they sprinted into the tree line, retreating deeper until the compound disappeared behind branches and fog. Only then did Kyle stop. He turned, chest heaving. Alvarez bent over, hands on his knees. Kyle, he gasped. You blew the scenario. Kyle frowned. What? My role wasn't a hostage or extraction candidate, Alvarez said, straightening. Commander Vance inserted me as a reluctant informant. I had intel to pass. You were supposed to assess whether I was reliable. You weren't supposed to yank me out. The words hit harder than the recoil of a rifle. Kyle's jaw clenched. I did what I thought. You reacted, Alvarez said gently. You didn't analyze. A rustle. They turned. Commander Vance stood among the trees, arms folded, rain dripping from her bun, face unreadable. She had seen everything, but instead of anger, her eyes held something worse. Resignation. She had expected this failure. Her silence carved deeper than any reprimand. Then her radio crackled sharply, an emergency frequency, urgent and real. Airfield incident, training bird down. Repeat, aircraft down. Multiple injuries, immediate response required. Cassandra keyed her mic instantly, her voice shifting into hardened steel. Control, this is Vance. I am with 2 cadets. We're inbound. She looked at Kyle, this time not as an instructor but as a battlefield leader. Move, she ordered, and the 3 of them ran, toward a disaster none of them were prepared for. The airfield was a quarter-mile away, but the urgency in Commander Vance's stride made the distance feel like nothing. Kyle and Alvarez sprinted behind her, weaving through trees and cutting across muddy terrain slick from the morning's storms. The radio continued to crackle with clipped transmissions. Fear under discipline, urgency under protocol. Rotor strike on auto-rotation descent. Fuel leak detected. Containment teams en route. 2 cadets unconscious, 1 trapped. The words pushed Kyle harder than any drill ever had. This wasn't a scenario. No red lights on vests. No instructors waiting in the wings. This was real. As they broke out of the tree line, the wreck came into view. An OH-58 training helicopter tilted violently to one side. One rotor blade snapped clean off. The other bent downward like a broken wing. Smoke wisped from the engine housing. Several cadets and staff were already on scene, but chaos rippled through every movement. Cassandra didn't hesitate. Alvarez with medical. Patterson, establish a perimeter now. Her voice cut through the panic like a razor. Kyle snapped into action. He moved toward a group of stunned cadets lingering too close to the wreck. You 3, spread out 15-meter intervals. Keep bystanders back. You 2, open a landing zone for the medevac bird. Clear that debris and mark the boundaries. The cadets responded instantly to his command tone. Maybe it was the adrenaline, maybe it was the uniform, or maybe it was the first moment Kyle realized he could lead without forcing it. Meanwhile, Cassandra ran straight toward the downed helicopter. A cadet lay on the ground with a compound fracture, blood mixing with the mud around him. Another was trapped halfway inside the cockpit, pinned by a twisted panel. A third sat shaking near the tail, eyes unfocused, partially deafened by the crash. Cassandra knelt beside the trapped cadet, ignoring the heat radiating from the engine housing. "Talk to me," she said, her voice steady, controlled. "Where are you hurt?" He whimpered. "My leg. Can't move it, ma'am. The fuel—" "I'm aware." She examined the wreckage, then motioned to 2 staff members. "Bring the stabilization bar and an extinguisher on standby." Her hands worked with precise, confident movements. Circulation checks, pressure stabilization, injury assessment. Blood streaked her forearms, mixing with mud, but her face stayed composed. Kyle finished securing the outer perimeter and returned to the crash zone. The metallic scent of fuel hit him instantly. Flames hadn't started, but one spark could turn the wreck into an inferno. Cassandra glanced up just long enough to bark, "Patterson, get eye contact with that cadet. Keep him conscious." Kyle crouched beside the young man lying in the mud. His leg was twisted at a sickening angle, bone visible through torn flesh. Kyle swallowed hard. "Hey," he said, forcing calm into his voice. "Look at me. Stay awake. You're not alone." The cadet's breaths were ragged. "Hurts. It hurts so bad." "I know," Kyle said. "Focus on my voice. What's your name?" "B. Bennett." "All right, Bennett. Stay with me. Help is here." Behind them, Cassandra coordinated the extrication of the trapped cadet. She directed pressure points, leverage angles, and timing windows like she had done it 1,000 times before, because she had. The staff moved under her guidance as if she were still in command of a special operations unit. At that moment, Kyle understood something he hadn't grasped until now. Cassandra wasn't just training them for combat. She was teaching them how to remain human in catastrophe. A distant thumping grew louder, the medevac helicopter inbound. Cassandra stood wiping blood on her fatigues and pointed toward the clearing Kyle's team had prepared. "Patterson, LZ status." "Clear and marked," he shouted back. "Good, hold that perimeter. Nobody moves until that bird is on the ground." Kyle ran to reinforce the landing zone. The medevac helicopter descended in a storm of wind and noise, rotor wash blasting rain and dirt across the field. Paramedics rushed out, taking over the triage. Cassandra briefed them in fast, clinical bursts. Fracture, severe blood loss, one trapped in progress, one concussed and disoriented. No fire yet, but risk is high. She finished just as the trapped cadet was freed. Paramedics lifted him onto a stretcher. The other casualties followed. Kyle watched Cassandra, noting the subtle tremor in her fingers, not from fear, but from the adrenaline after effect of someone who had been here too many times before. When the helicopter lifted away, silence replaced the chaos. Cassandra turned to Kyle, rain streaking down her face. Not angry, not disappointed, just tired. "There are no perfect decisions in chaos," she said, "only necessary ones." Kyle didn't respond. He couldn't. The weight of the lesson was too heavy. They began walking back toward the academy. By the time they reached Colonel Thorne's office, Kyle was braced for condemnation. But instead, he would learn the truth behind Cassandra Vance's mission and receive an offer that would alter the trajectory of his entire life. The summons to Colonel Thorne's office came at dusk, delivered by a breathless runner who saluted sharply before hurrying on. Kyle Patterson followed the familiar hallway in silence, his boots leaving faint trails of airfield mud across polished floors. The academy's lights glowed warm and steady, a stark contrast to the chaos of the helicopter crash only hours earlier. His uniform was clean now, but the memory of blood and smoke lingered on his skin like an invisible stain. At the colonel's door stood Commander Cassandra Vance, waiting with her hands clasped behind her back. She looked composed, restored to her uniform, hair immaculate, posture razor straight. But Kyle had seen the tremor in her fingers earlier. He had seen what chaos carved into a person's soul. Tonight he saw the quiet weight behind her eyes. "Enter," she said. Kyle stepped inside. Colonel Thorne sat behind his oak desk, the room dimly lit except for a desk lamp illuminating a single folder. His expression was impossible to read. somewhere between stern and reflective. Cassandra took her place beside him. "At ease, cadet," Thorne said. Kyle shifted to parade rest, bracing himself for reprimand. The mistakes of the exercise, the misread signal, the extraction that shouldn't have happened, still burned in his mind. He expected consequences. Harsh ones. Thorne folded his hands. "We've reviewed your performance in today's evolution." Kyle lifted his chin. "Yes, sir. You demonstrated exceptional endurance during the navigation phase," Thorne said. "Accurate terrain assessment, excellent avoidance of roving patrols." Kyle waited for the however. It didn't come. Instead, Cassandra stepped forward, her voice calm and sharp. "You failed the primary objective in the reconnaissance phase," she said without softness. "You identified a variable, Alvarez, but you did not evaluate his role. You acted before analyzing. That mistake would have gotten a team killed." Kyle inhaled, steady but ashamed. "Yes, ma'am. But," she continued, "in the real-world emergency at the airfield, you executed your responsibilities precisely. No hesitation, no theatrics. You established a perimeter, secured the landing zone, and maintained order under critical conditions. You led effectively." Kyle blinked. He hadn't expected praise. Not from her. Thorne leaned back. Commander Vance wasn't brought to Blackwood to toughen cadets for parade drills. She was given authority to identify individuals with potential for elite command pathways, the kind of leadership needed when protocol collapses and chaos rules. Cassandra picked up the folder from Thorne's desk and held it out to Kyle. It was thin but heavy with meaning. "This is a conditional nomination to the Inter-Service Advanced Leadership Program," she said. "A joint special operations track. The first filter for candidates marked for deep field leadership roles." Kyle stared, stunned. "Me? You?" Cassandra confirmed, her voice level. "Not because of your family, because today, for the first time, you showed the beginnings of what's required. You acted with discipline when the situation was real. You followed purpose, not ego." He swallowed. "Ma'am, after what happened in the exercise—" "Your failure was important," she interrupted. "You needed to fail. You needed to see what unchecked instinct looks like. You needed to face the consequences of acting without thinking." Her gaze held his. "Master Chief Croft taught me that courage means nothing without judgment. You proved today you can learn that." Kyle felt something shift in him. Something deep, foundational. For years he had carried the weight of expectation. His father's legacy, his family's name. But now, for the first time, he was being seen for his potential, not his pedigree. Thorne nodded. "This nomination is not a guarantee. It's an invitation. A door. Whether you walk through it is your decision." Kyle looked down at the folder, then back at Cassandra. "Why me?" Her expression softened by a fraction. "Because I saw myself in you," she said quietly. "Raw talent, dangerous instincts, and a chance, if shaped correctly, to become someone worthy of trust." Kyle exhaled, the decision forming with clarity he hadn't expected. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "I accept." Cassandra nodded once, not with approval but with acknowledgement. "Then your training begins tomorrow. Not as punishment, as preparation." Thorne dismissed him with a final salute. Kyle stepped out into the cool night air, the folder under his arm feeling heavier than any rucksack he had carried. For the first time, he wasn't walking in his family's shadow. He was walking toward a path entirely his own, and somewhere behind him, watching through the office window, Commander Cassandra Vance allowed herself the smallest hint of a smile, one earned through battle, grief, and the hope that perhaps one day Kyle Patterson would carry the torch she had once taken from Master Chief Croft. If you liked the video, subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments what time it is where you're watching from. It helps more than you know.